What happens when someone says something so devastating in a studio that even Dr. Phil freezes in his tracks? I can't do this anymore. The words barely escaped her lips, but they hit the room like a freight train. Dr. Phil's hand shot up. Stop the tape. Everyone stop. The cameras kept rolling, but something had shifted. This wasn't just another episode. What she said next would change everything, not just for her, but for everyone in that room. Her name was Emma. 23 years old, sitting in that guest chair with her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. She'd come to the Dr. Phil show because her family insisted. They said she needed help. They said she was acting out. They said a lot of things. But nobody had asked her what she needed to say. The episode had started like dozens of others. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage, the audience applauded, the cameras positioned themselves. Emma's mother sat in the second guest chair, perfectly composed, makeup flawless, ready to tell her side of the story. Emma has been difficult since she was a teenager, her mother explained with that practiced tone of exhausted patience. She won't hold down a job. She's isolated herself from the family. She refuses to participate in anything. We just don't understand what happened to our sweet girl. Dr. Phil nodded, taking notes. He'd heard variations of this story hundreds of times. Troubled young adult. Concerned family. Communication breakdown. Standard intervention territory. But Emma's silence was different. Dr. Phil could feel it. Emma, he began, his voice taking on that firm but gentle quality he perfected over 2 decades. Your mom says you've pulled away from everyone. Talk to me about that. What's going on in your world? Emma stared at her hands. The studio lights felt too bright. The audience seemed too close. Her mother's presence beside her felt suffocating. I'm fine, she whispered. You're fine, Dr. Phil repeated, his tone suggesting he didn't believe a word of it. Emma, people who are fine don't isolate themselves. People who are fine don't quit jobs they're good at. People who are fine don't come on national television and refuse to make eye contact. So let me ask you again, what's really going on? The silence stretched. 30 seconds. 45 seconds. In television time, it was an eternity. The producers were getting nervous. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Emma's mother reached over to touch her daughter's arm. Don't touch me. The words came out sharp, sudden. Emma pulled away like she'd been burned. That's when Dr. Phil saw it. The flinch. The recoil. The fear. Hold on, Dr. Phil said, standing up from his chair. He moved closer to Emma, but careful to maintain distance. Emma, I need you to look at me for just a second. She raised her eyes. For the first time, Dr. Phil saw past the defiance, past the walls, past the carefully constructed armor. What he saw made his stomach drop. Emma. His voice had gone completely quiet now. Are you safe at home? The question hung in the air. Emma's mother stiffened. Of course she's safe. What kind of question? Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to let your daughter answer. Dr. Phil never took his eyes off Emma. Emma. Are you safe? Emma's voice cracked. I can't do this anymore. And that's when Dr. Phil stopped everything. Stop the tape, he said firmly. His hand went up. The control room hesitated. This wasn't in the script. I said stop the tape. Everyone stop. The cameras kept recording, but the usual flow of the show had shattered. Dr. Phil turned to his producer standing off camera. Get me a therapist from the resource team. Now. And I need a private room set up. He turned back to Emma, who was now shaking visibly. Emma, I want you to know something. You're safe right now. In this moment you are safe. And you don't have to say another word on this stage if you don't want to. But I think you came here because you needed someone to hear you. Am I right? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay, Dr. Phil said gently. Here's what we're going to do. You and I are going to step off this stage. We're going to go somewhere private. And you're going to tell me what you need to tell me. No cameras. No audience. Just you and me. Can you do that? Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Emma stood on shaking legs. Dr. Phil guided her off the stage, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching, giving support without invading her space. The audience sat in complete, stunned silence. Emma's mother started to follow. "Ma'am." Dr. Phil turned back, his voice taking on a tone nobody in the studio had heard before. "You need to stay here. My team will talk to you separately. But she's my daughter. And right now, she needs to feel safe to speak. Please. Sit down." There was no negotiation in his voice. Emma's mother sat. Off stage, in a small consultation room normally used for producer meetings, Dr. Phil sat across from Emma. The walls were soundproofed. A therapist from the show's resource team sat quietly in the corner, there if needed but giving space. "Emma," Dr. Phil said, his entire demeanor shifted from television host to the psychologist he'd been before fame. "What do you need to tell me?" The floodgates opened. "He comes to my room at night." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Mom's boyfriend. She doesn't know. Or maybe she does know and she just doesn't want to see it. It started 2 years ago. I tried to tell her once, and she said I was jealous, that I was trying to ruin her happiness, that I always had to make everything about me." Dr. Phil's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "How long has this been going on?" 2 years. Ever since she moved him in. I tried to move out, but she said if I left, I was betraying the family. I tried to get a job and save money, but she said I needed to stay home and help take care of my younger sisters. I'm trapped. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. "Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. What you just told me is not your fault. None of it. Not one single piece of it is your fault. Do you hear me?" She nodded, sobbing. "Here's what's going to happen. My team has connections with some of the best trauma counselors in the country. We're going to get you somewhere safe, tonight. Not back to that house. We're going to make sure you have resources, support, and people who can help you through this. And if you choose to report what happened, we'll help you with that too. But that choice is yours. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Not a show card. His personal card. "This is my direct line. Not the show line. Mine. If you need anything at all, you call that number. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. You call. Understood?" Emma took the card with trembling hands. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 20 years ago, I made a promise to myself. When someone walks into my studio, really needing help, not just looking for their 15 minutes of fame, but actually drowning and reaching for a lifeline, I will not let them leave without throwing them that rope. That's why." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. When Dr. Phil and Emma returned to the stage 45 minutes later, Emma's mother was still sitting there, now surrounded by 2 of the show's security personnel. The audience had been briefed that something serious had occurred and had been asked to remain quiet and respectful. Dr. Phil addressed the audience directly, something he rarely did with such gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is not entertainment. This is real life. This young woman came to this studio today carrying a secret that was destroying her. And she found the courage to speak. What happens next matters more than ratings, more than content, more than any of the usual things we worry about in television." He turned to Emma's mother. "Ma'am, your daughter has made some very serious allegations. Allegations that, if true, represent criminal behavior in your home and a failure of protection on your part as a parent." Emma's mother's face had gone pale. I don't know what she told you, but I'm going to stop you right there," Dr. Phil said firmly. "You're going to have an opportunity to speak with trained professionals. You're going to have an opportunity to cooperate with an investigation if your daughter chooses to pursue one. But right now, in this moment, this is not about you. This is about your daughter finding her voice after 2 years of silence." He turned back to Emma, who was now seated in her chair, looking simultaneously terrified and relieved. "Emma, you did something incredibly brave today. You spoke a truth that was eating you alive. That takes more courage than most people will ever have to summon in their entire lives." The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then building. Several people were openly crying. Dr. Phil raised his hand for quiet. "I want to make something very clear to everyone watching at home. If you are in a situation where you don't feel safe, where someone in a position of trust is abusing that trust, where speaking up feels impossible, it's not impossible. There are people who will listen. There are resources available. You don't have to carry that weight alone. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten." Behind the scenes, Dr. Phil's team had already mobilized. Within 2 hours of the taping, Emma had been connected with a trauma specialist. By that evening, she was staying in a safe house funded by one of the show's partner organizations. Within a week, she had her own apartment, a part-time job set up through the show's network, and a full support team. Dr. Phil checked in personally every few days for the first month. Not through assistants. Him. Direct calls. "How are you doing? Do you need anything? Are you sleeping? Are you safe?" The episode never aired. Not in its original form. Instead, Dr. Phil recorded a special episode about recognizing signs of abuse, featuring experts and advocates, with Emma's permission to share her story in general terms without identifying details. But that moment in the studio, when everything stopped, when Dr. Phil chose a human being over a television show, when Emma found her voice in the silence, that moment changed everyone in the room. 6 months later, Dr. Phil received a letter. The handwriting was careful, measured. Inside was a photo of Emma at her college enrollment ceremony and a simple note. "You told me my voice mattered. I'm starting to believe it. Thank you for stopping the tape. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. Emma." Dr. Phil kept that note in his desk drawer. On days when television felt like just entertainment, when the lights and cameras and ratings seemed to matter too much, he'd pull out that note and remember why he really did this work. Years later, he would tell his staff about that day. "I've done thousands of shows. I've talked to people dealing with every problem you can imagine. But that day, the day I stopped the tape, that's the day I remembered what this is really about. It's not about the show. It's not about the audience. It's about the person in that chair who needs someone to see them, really see them, and say, 'I believe you. You matter. We're going to help you.'" The business card he'd given Emma? He kept a stack of them in his pocket for every taping after that. Personal cards. Direct line. Real help. Emma's case led to an investigation. Her mother's boyfriend was arrested and charged. Emma's relationship with her mother remained fractured, but with therapy, Emma began to rebuild herself piece by piece. She graduated college 3 years later. Started a nonprofit for young adults escaping unsafe home situations. Spoke at conferences about finding your voice when the world tells you to stay quiet. And every year, on the anniversary of that taping, she sent Dr. Phil a message. Just a simple one. "Still using my voice? Thank you for teaching me it matters." The lesson from that quiet confession resonates far beyond one episode. In a world of noise, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop everything and listen. Really listen. Not to respond, not to judge, not to fix, but to witness someone's truth with the respect it deserves. Dr. Phil learned something that day too. He'd spent 2 decades helping people on television, but the moment he turned off the cameras, the moment he chose the person over the production, that's when real healing began. That white envelope on the table during the taping? It contained contact information for crisis resources Dr. Phil had prepared before the show, sensing something was off. He always came prepared. But that day, being prepared meant being willing to throw out the script entirely. The silence in the studio that day was heavy, uncomfortable, necessary. It was the sound of a truth too big to be ignored finally finding space to exist. It was the sound of protection failing and then being rebuilt. It was the sound of one voice, quiet and trembling, finally being heard. And for Dr. Phil, it was a reminder that sometimes the most important thing a person in a position of influence can do is stop everything, get off the stage, sit across from someone in pain, and simply say, "I hear you. I believe you. Let's figure this out together." That's not television. That's humanity. The ripple effect of that day extended far beyond anyone imagined. Other survivors who had watched began reaching out. They sent letters, emails, messages saying, "I thought I was alone." Dr. Phil's team created a dedicated resource hotline. Within months, hundreds of people found the courage to seek help. Emma's story, told anonymously, became part of training materials for therapists and social workers. "This is what it looks like when someone finally breaks," instructors would say. "And this is what it looks like when help shows up at exactly the right moment." Dr. Phil framed that thank you note from Emma. Not in his office where cameras might catch it, but in his private study at home. On difficult days he'd look at it and remember, one voice, one moment, one choice to stop and listen, it all mattered. And in the end, humanity matters more than any show ever could.